We're in. We're in.
Yeah.
What's going
Hey
on?
man, how's it? Oh, it's just another good day. Another day in paradise.
A day in paradise. Where are you at? I know so little about you, Ryan Job.
I'm in Mississippi, so currently I'm currently at in my hometown of Columbus. I live down in Cleveland, Mississippi. Not to be confused with Cleveland, Ohio, but
Right. Two very
that's
different places.
yeah, two very different places, very much so. So you're out in Cincinnati, though, right?
Yeah, a little further north. Still hot.
Yeah,
Still muggy. Yeah.
just across the river there.
True. We represent two sides. Two sides.
Awesome, man. Thanks for doing this, and I'm really happy that you're here. This is really cool. The last time we did this, I had Phil Andrews on here, and it was a really great time. We got to chat, and there were some great questions, and so I wanted to continue this and get some more people on. It's just a cool time to connect with people. Maybe get people in who may not know us, personally, but they may know of us or may know the guests that I'm coming in, and it's a good time to bring people in and ask questions and things that you may not have the opportunity to do, or maybe you may not know them personally, but this is kind of a relaxed setting to let people kind of join in and just watch and get some insight on some things. So today is all about you and what you're bringing here. I know your Instagram page with Chop Out, it's really taken over and up over the last year or so, and so I think that's really cool. You've got a lot of really great content. I love the website, all the stuff that you got going there. I think that's really cool. And you played at PASIC and won the competition there, for that back in November, and that's really cool. Lots of really good stuff going your way, and I think that's some really awesome things. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit before we get started. And those of you who are watching, try to get your other friends in here, because we're going to chat a little bit, and this will be a great time to get some questions in. But before we jump to those, I wanted to get to know you a little bit about your background, your upbringing, how you got started, maybe some teachers that have really influenced you in things, and places that you marched with or played with, and other things, because I think you got a Rhythm X history too.
Right.
That's really cool. So talk about that. Give us a little bit of your background. Give us a little bit of where you come from, where you stand on things, and just get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I started like many in school band in middle school. I showed interest in percussion from pretty young. And then, band class in middle school would be the first time I actually was able to play an instrument in a controlled setting. And then kind of just coasted for a while, was a student in music for 5 or so years until I was like halfway through high school. And I was like, this is kind of, what I plan to do. I don't really want to do anything else. So I actually started getting, pretty good and spending time practicing. I would say my biggest secret was that I sold my Xbox at the end of my sophomore year of high school, and that, anytime I was on Xbox, I had a drum pad in my lap anyway, just playing. So all the people I'd be playing with would be hearing it over the mic and just wouldn't play with me anymore. So sold the Xbox, bought, a nice drum pad, and just off to the races with practicing nonstop through high school. Ended up in music school. Music education is kind of what I do, because the summer after high school I started teaching right away at a school different from the one that I was at. And I had such a good time doing that I decided, it's the teaching that I really enjoy more than the playing. I didn't know that yet, but I definitely know I like teaching. And then 2017, I did Rhythm X, marched fifth bass there, which is a real treat. Probably the
Oh yeah.
healthiest I've ever been, but also at the same time, probably the least healthy I've ever been as far as sleep. Trying to go to college full time and also do Rhythm X is or
Yeah.
any indoor group is going to prove to be a challenge, but I wasn't alone. And then after that year, I didn't really see myself going back. Kind of confirmed my suspicions that the teaching was more where my head was at, and the performing and all that was great, and like being taught by all the awesome staff at Rhythm X was obviously, out of this world. But I didn't go back. I transferred schools to a much larger conservatory after that, and I just decided to do music school like full time, including weekends, for the next 3 years, and now I'm here. I started Chop Out 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, May 4th. I guess that doesn't really matter, but I knew I was pretty good at putting the videos together, and I was always hacking on a drum pad to music anyway, so it really didn't take too much effort to start putting together the first couple videos. And then I pushed myself to do like 100 in a row every single day, which I didn't do. I only got to like 70. B, it exhausted me, to a great extent. I also broke my hand that fall after I started Chop Out, so it definitely, when I first started doing it, there was just so many videos and so many new followers. I got so caught up in it. But since it's mellowed out, I've been able to kind of experiment. Not doing a video every day, it really gives you the opportunity to spend more than one day on a video. Sounds self-explanatory, but it really makes a world of a difference. If you go watch my old Chop Outs, they're considerably worse, and just because I don't even think I think a lot of my actual writing back then was probably on par with what it is now, but the videos themselves and the playing, I think, was a lot better now than it was before. So I did Chop Out, and then I've just been teaching at high schools and stuff the last couple of years, and loving it, and just secured a really big job here, about 30 minutes north, that I will be starting this fall through the winter. So
Awesome.
that's my story.
Yeah. Is that a full-time gig, or is that a?
It's a lot of different things right now because we don't know what the marching band season is going to look like.
Yeah, that's true.
So calling it full-time or part-time is super kind of guessy. But it's something that I plan to be with, or a gig that I plan to have for a while. It's not just a tech position. I'm not just on a staff. I actually have responsibilities, which is cool. It's kind of what you need when you're this age.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of go the same way you do as far as right out of high school, I got a drumline teaching gig on the side while I was going to school, and I knew I wanted to do music, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And through that, I discovered I really enjoyed teaching, and that was kind of the route that I followed. And I'm kind of like you. I enjoy performing a lot, but the teaching stuff, the picking people's brain, learning from other people to how do you teach that kind of thing. That's really what I enjoy the most as well. So that's kind of where my heart has always been, and I still try to keep myself up to a performance level to where I can keep up with the higher levels if I needed to do that and things like that. But I'm a couple of years older than you, I think, but at the same time, it's good to keep fresh on what things are going on and trying to keep that relevant, because as much as things change over the years, and some styles may change, or just commonalities or things change over time. I never want to be one of those teachers that I know from this time frame to this time frame, and that's where I'm going to stick to my teachings, because I think it's important as teachers to continue to learn as much as you teach. So, but
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the reason, that realization that, any drummer can stand in front of a drum line and teach and like tell them what to do and tell
right.
them what you were told when you were in high school or when you were marching wherever. But to actually like know something beyond what you have already been taught takes some training and some information. That's why I decided not to do Rhythm X and do a pretty high level music ed degree, because it was the human development side of things. It's how people learn that I was so interested in. So it's just more satisfactory to me to teach well versus to do a good performance. I've done good performances, and I've taught really good lessons, and the good lessons end up making me feel better at the end of the day than the good performances. You know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, let's dig into some of your philosophies a bit. And if anybody's watching, and you have some questions, feel free to go ahead and start putting them in, and we'll get to them. And so I'll just start with one. What is your approach to beginner drummers? A lot of people have a certain way to go about things. There's the grip, there's placement, there's all these types of strokes and all this stuff. And so say you have a new beginner who is really excited and wanting to learn, and what would be your criteria or things that you look at to tell them right away these are the most important fundamental things that you need to know?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something I did just right before everything was shutting down. I had a class that would take us to a middle school like once every couple weeks, and we'd teach students. We'd do sectionals with this middle school band. We'd just pull kids aside and teach them. And these were 6th and 7th graders, so a lot of the percussionists, first couple months of holding sticks, which is such an interesting time. So the basic philosophy is realizing that percussion is unlike any other instrument because of how physical it is. You can verbally explain what's going on in every woodwind instrument and every brass instrument. You could teach that without an instrument in your hand. You could give a student a list of instructions, and then they go pick it up for the first time, and they could at least make a sound, at least like a tolerable noise coming out of the instrument. With percussion, you need to have this workshop time. You need to be able to have the student with sticks in their hands and time with the sticks and with the drum to figure out how the drum relates to them and how the sticks relate to their hands. So, for example, I was teaching a lesson. I went in, and the band director, this middle school band director, was like, everything's going great. They're getting the rhythms all well. We're doing all the warm-ups and stuff. They can play a couple scales, but none of them can do a multiple bounce roll, which I think back is probably one of the harder things to learn as a new percussionist, is being able to throw a stick at a drum and have a sustained sound, which is kind of ridiculous if you haven't done it before.
Yeah.
So you go in and you do this. I do this entire physical kind of activity. I say, show me the grip, show me the fulcrum, show me the supporting fingers. I'm giving them a vocabulary of the physical aspects before they try to make the sound, and then give them time to experiment with those physical aspects while they're listening to what sound is coming out. And I think the biggest thing with teachers, and especially middle school band directors who aren't percussionists, they try to do one or the other. So they'll say, use your ears and try to connect the sound between each buzz. Okay, but how? Or squeeze the fulcrum and then allow the supporting fingers to sustain the sound.
Right.
But like if you're not listening, then you can't really do it physically, and if you're not considering the physical aspect, you can't really figure out what's going on. Hold on, I just activated Siri over here. Where's the power button? There it is. So, pretty much, the philosophy. I've spent way too long talking about this.
No, that's good.
Yeah, so it's setting up their knowledge of what is actually happening in the hand and how does it relate to the sound. And the only way you can get them to truly understand that is by giving them time to experiment. So that's that, and that's why I think drum pads are so important, because it gives you the physical aspect of things, and you get enough sound that you can kind of
Right.
sort of engage both sides of the coin.
Yeah, exactly. And it's different for people. Like you mentioned, it's such a physical thing, and it takes time for you to understand how it feels. I've had students before where they are doing all the right things, on paper, but they're still not connecting it to themselves on how that feels with that sound, and that takes time, to get that comfortable. And and you brought up a great point with a buzz roll or the multiple bounce roll or whatever people want to call it, because that is such a change with what your hands are doing. And there's a couple of ways to do it, which I think is cool, because I only really thought of one way to do it for a long time, and that was just the way I taught it, until a very good friend of mine, we were chatting these types of things, and he's a band director. He teaches percussion and things, and he's really good at what he does. And he's like, really, I do like the opposite. And I was like, well, how do you do it? And so we were talking about it, and I was like, that makes sense too. And he said, I usually try it this way first because I feel like there's more success on the front end from my experience. He said, but I have used it your way before, just in case, as an alternative, if they were a little longer. And so there's there's the approach where you squeeze a lot and it's presses, and then you relax the hands, which is his version, or get as many bounces as you can out, and then slowly speed up the hands and slowly, squeeze more as you do it. So, I think that's kind of preference, but I think that adds another way to approach it to where you can kind of get it from each end and think of it that way. I don't know what your approach is.
You can get into the rhetoric of it, because a lot of students get confused with pretty much anything you say at all.
Yeah.
So just like, for example, do as many bounces as you can and then speed it up. That can mean so many different things, because speed exists in both hand-to-hand. It exists in the stick bouncing. How many times is it bouncing in a given time?
Right.
And speed also, like velocity towards the drum. Am I speeding up like this? That's not connecting the sound, but that's increasing the speed.
Right.
So that's why the experimental period is so important, because there's only so much explaining you can do. That's what I was saying.
Right.
Everyone's mouth is pretty much the same, so you can explain concrete, like physical motions in brass and woodwind playing and singing, because everyone kind of has the same size or same shape of mouth. It's a hole on your face. But everybody, like every single person in the world, has a different hand. No one has the same exact, finger to palm proportion. And hand size is a big deal, and also hand strength. Every student's going to have a completely different experience with the stick in the hand. So that's, we're on the same page. But
Yeah.
it's tough. I'm saying right now that teaching drums is harder than teaching any other instrument, because it's tough because you can't explain it.
Yeah, there's so much detail that goes into it, and it's with my friends who are band directors or things that aren't percussionists, they can teach the fundamental stuff pretty well, like their junior high kids. They can read, they can count, they can do basic strokes pretty well, and then they start getting scared whenever they start getting closer to high school, and then they start asking me questions. And and my first response to all of them is, well, have you tried playing it? If you know the fundamental stuff, like you said, it's a lot of spending time on how that works. You know, it's like I encourage them all to, you know, just try to learn what they're trying to learn. I mean, there's no shame in, you know, I taught band, you know, I'm terrible at woodwinds and I know that, but I don't spend that much time with it. But, you know, when I try to pick up an instrument that's not percussion and I try to play it in front of the kids, you know, they appreciate the fact that, you know, I'm not at that, you know, level of mastery on every single instrument. You know, it's like, well, for me, you know, I know how the mechanics work, and let me try it with you. And I think there's a lot of appreciation that goes in as when you're a music student, especially when you're younger, of seeing like your teacher at least attempting to understand what you're asking in a way that's not just telling.
Yeah, for sure.
But so that's some things. I know we've got several people coming in and joining. So if you have any questions on things, you know, music wise, technique wise, teaching wise, we'd love.
Our personal questions. I'm a pretty good guy.
Yeah, I think that's really cool how you sold your Xbox. You had to get the distraction.
That's my second favorite story on how dedicated I was, and maybe my favorite story will come up in the next 40 minutes.
Said you telling all your secrets, so.
Yeah, true. They gotta ask for my secrets though. I'm not just gonna start spewing. I got too many secrets.
Right. Cool. I have a question about some of your video editing and things. Whenever you're writing the music, first, what kind of software do you use to edit in that sense?
I used to do it all on my phone.
Okay.
And I pretty much still do. I use an app called Luma Fusion or Luma Touch or something. The name on the app is different from the name in the App Store. So it's just kind of a stock video editor. It's like 2 steps ahead of iMovie, which was the other option of editing on your phone.
Yeah.
And then there's like, God, so many like other video editing apps that require a watermark in the corner. I never mess with those because I think those look tacky. So I just dropped like $7 or $10 or whatever it was to get this better app, and it's kind of all I've needed. I was using Final Cut Pro for a while, but I realized I didn't really see a difference between Final Cut, this $200 software, and this $10 app, especially for what I was doing. So I use the app, Luma Fusion, and I use it on my iPad.
Yeah, I've been trying to experiment and explore different video editing things because I'm a little new to it, but I've been trying to do some research and try to get some better stuff out here. We do have one comment or question here. It says, my left hand sounds darker in a way compared to my right hand. I don't know if it's the sticks or just my squeezing or what. Traditional grip too. So I guess both matched and traditional.
Yeah, so if we're talking tone, hand to hand, this is some stuff I've been experimenting the last couple weeks. I've been taking a couple lessons with Josh Bricky, who is one of the teachers back at Rhythm X. So he had a special on online lessons, so I jumped on it. And he talks about the resonance and the sound coming out of the drum is a lot of it's from the pressure of the stick, how much of the stick is resonating. So if the left hand sounds darker, for example, I'll play for you. This is my right hand. The left hand is just like ever so much, a little drier, a little darker, a little lower. That's because I'm squeezing my left hand. And the fulcrum pressure means so much when it comes to tone. Very rarely will you actually receive a mismatched pair of sticks from Vic Firth or whoever. They usually match their sticks just fine. It's just a lot of people can't match their hand pressure when they're playing, so it sounds unmatched. So experiment with just playing right hand and left hand, and use your ears. Don't just mess around with the pressure alone. Use your ears and see if you can experiment what we were talking about with the middle schoolers. Not to insult you or anything, but experiment with your ears and also the physicality of it to, see what you need to do to fix that left hand. And it's probably in the direction of loosening up the tension in the fulcrum and making sure, especially this guy right here, this finger, isn't, hog tying the stick from the bottom, because that will cut off a lot of resonance. A lot of people squeeze too much on the supporting fingers. That's my best guess.
Yeah, great. Great answer there. You got another? Do you have any recommendations for trying to myself on tenors? I think says, I don't know where exactly to get started, but I have a pretty decent match grip on concert snare drums. So I guess applying that match grip on getting around the tenors. That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, biggest thing to think about with
I'm sorry,
tenors,
how to teach myself.
Right. Kind of assumed. The biggest thing with tenors is you need the same matched grip wherever you're playing. So like, here's drum 1 and here's drum 3. It has to be the same stroke. And the only way you can do that is by moving the entire unit of the wrist, finger, hand complex, moving that entire unit to being in front of that drum. You can't alter the position like that, because then it's a different stroke. This is different than this. And while you're hitting drum 1 here and drum 3 here, it's better if you're hitting drum 1 here and hitting drum 3 here, because it's the same stroke. So, fundamentally, the first steps you should take, and the first steps I wish I would have taken, it would have alleviated me a lot of comments in high school when I marched tenors. You don't need a full tenor pad. You don't even need a drum pad per se. Just two surfaces about a foot apart. One right in front of you, one a foot to the right or a foot to the left. And just watch your hands. Watch your matched grip as you're playing the middle surface, the most comfortable one, which would be the equivalent to a concert snare drum, and then move to the other surface and try to get both the visual of what your hand looks like to stay the same by moving your arm out, and also the sensation of swinging the stick. This feels a lot different than this, and while this might be easier, like in context, you can't play drums like this. There's a reason why, this isn't the grip pretty much ever. Not really. Maybe with timpani, maybe just in the concert halls, but it's all about moving the entire hand, finger, wrist structure over to the drum rather than trying to manipulate that to just reach the stick.
Yeah, I think another thing to point out too is that the playing spot is also different as far as with marching snare drum, we're always taught it's right dead center, and with tenors it's a completely different idea. If you go dead center, you're not getting a resonant sound, and so a lot of people, and then another thing I've noticed, they pull back to that resonant area. They have the tenor markings, but they'll have it kind of in the center, pulled back at that resonant spot, and then the center pulled back way here, and that's fine. But I feel like that's a lot of motion to use, where you can still get in that right playing spot and just move it a little bit, where you just have an efficiency of motion to move around, and that you don't have to reach back so far in that playing.
And a big realization I had when I was playing tenors is it was really just a straight line with the zones. I mean, you're playing on top of the bigger drums, you're playing on the bottom of the smaller drums. So that lines up. The tenors look like that so that you're playing on a straight line. So if you're trying to think of like this arc of like where the zones are, you're going to have a much harder time than if you're just thinking on this line. And you can just kind of imagine the line, because that will work for zones. I mean, you can find a set of tenors or a tenor pad and put a stick across all of the zones, and you won't have to turn the stick at all.
That's right. Yeah, very nice. Going back to my friend who he kind of does things a little differently. he actually starts his beginners once they have the basic strokes down, all on a tenor pad. And his theory on that is, he said, well, how many times do we play just one surface in percussion? You know, it's not that much. We actually play multiple instruments or multiple setups far more often as we progress than we do, you know, just on a snare drum or something, or just on a bass drum or one instrument. And, you know, and he said this gets them comfortable moving around early, to where whenever we do throw in, okay, now you have to play a snare drum, a cowbell, you know, this and this and this, all at the same time. Well, now that's like, okay, that might can freak you out. You know, it's like I only had to think about on one surface. And he's like, this gets them comfortable moving around. That's another cool idea. I've never tried it. That's what he tries. And I thought that was really cool. You know, it makes sense to me, you know, as percussionists, we have to get, it's such a physical moving thing. We got to be comfortable moving around while we're still listening and trying to get a good sound. So that's also it might be a tip to think about for future educators or things out there. Just trying things different. I think it's okay to try things different as long as you have a good idea behind it and you can support it. You know, I think that, and ask questions, you know, ask like these questions. These are great questions of, you know, if I was having to teach myself how to do this, what would be the best way to do it? And I think that's just what you need to do. Are there any more questions? Or Patrick, do you have any questions for me or for them?
Well, you're pretty new to the Instagram atmosphere, at least, you know, compared to Chop Out and compared to, you know, the other folks out there. It's a really weird ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. So tell me about because you mentioned you're trying to get more into the creative side of things, working with videos and stuff. What are you looking to do?
You know, these videos like this where it's kind of consistent, you know, like every 2 weeks or so, bringing somebody different to draw different people in for different things. And if you have anybody that you would recommend, I'd love to have them on too.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, consistent content. I've just recently moved, so I'm in the process of getting like my own little home music room studio type thing set up. So I'm planning on having like just like some weekly music things. Looking to do some educational things on the Sawyer's website. There's a battery technique packet that I really intentionally wrote for my friends who are not percussionists but are band teachers, and they can afford to bring in somebody adjunct or things like that. And you know, it's kind of comprehensive. It covers all the basic stuff that you need. That was kind of like the first version of that. I do want to, at some point, hopefully soon, to start doing a video breakdown of each exercise and things like that. And then I'm going to try to get a front ensemble version out soon as well. That people, it's free. You can download it. I'm all for free stuff. I think there needs to be more of that. Yeah. You know, so things like that. Yeah, yeah. You know, so because I know how tight people's budgets are, especially this year. You know, with everything that's been going on. So that's kind of where my head's at. I just love talking with people and love picking their brains and just chatting the stuff that we love to do. And then two, just trying to provide more resources for people that, you know, that they can rely on or ask for, and that they may not necessarily have the funds for lessons or may not necessarily have the resources to do, you know, things that other people, you know, have the advantage to do. So that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
That's cool. A piece of advice, and I guess secret number 2 of the interview. And this is something I tell people who are in my DMs, just like how do you get, you know, 1,000 followers? Because the summer I did 70 videos in a row, I ended up with 1,000 followers from May to July, which is not easy. It's not easy to get people to want to watch your videos so bad that they will, you know, mess up their ratio. on their page,
Right.
sacrifice their numbers to give you a follow. So secret is, and the secret I tell people is that I really didn't check my following during that summer where I was making the videos, because what I was doing was making the videos for me, and there's a bunch of drafts of whole videos that never got posted because I didn't really like watching them. I didn't think they were that cool, and they're the exact same kind of video that, you know, I did a really stupid video where I just played one note because people kept requesting sicko mode, and that one's far and away my most viewed video. It's got like 50,000 some odd views. I've got a bunch of stupid videos like that I haven't posted because I don't think they're that funny. So the secret is, if you're focused on the numeric values, likes and followers of creating, then you're going to immediately lose interest. Because A, it's something completely out of your control. I've seen some of the best drumming videos on Instagram from people that have 50, 70 followers.
Yeah.
So like that, take that into consideration. There's nothing you can do really to control A, the algorithm, B, how people are going to, you know, react to what they're seeing.
Right.
What's the second one? Oh, B. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, with followers, and this is a huge wall I hit like a year ago, where I had another span of time where I just did like video after video, and I was working so hard on them, and I was gearing up to my 100th chop out, and you know my view count was going down, and it really bummed me out because around that time I was like, man, I'm getting so many views. Now I'm not getting so many views, something must be wrong, and then I hit this like mental wall, and then I just completely kind of stopped. Most of last summer I didn't make much, and that's because I was so focused on the numbers. And at this time I had like 5,000 followers, which is ridiculous. That's way too many for one person to have, and that was way more than I was expecting to have, you know, in a year's time. But it still didn't feel like enough. If I had kept that mindset, it never would have felt like enough. There's always another number to reach. There's always someone else who you feel like is, you know, making lesser content than yours, but you should deserve more followers.
Yep.
It's going to be an entire struggle if you try to hit every milestone at a constant pace, because it's social media. It's not like ticket sales for a concert.
Yeah.
It's not predictable. And there's also so little benefits from being Instagram famous. Let me tell you, other than these free sticks, I have not gotten much. But it's cool that I, you know, going back, and the reason I take, you know, maybe a week on a video now is because I'm starting to enjoy my stuff, my content, especially the videos where I'm just talking. Those are the ones I dig the most, even though I don't get that many views. So, tip to you, and tip to anyone watching, secret number 2, if you're focused on the quantity of your creations, you're going to immediately want to stop creating.
Yep. That's good. That's really good. Appreciate that. Got another question. 5 principles or goals to be a great player.
All right, that's good. That's good. And I like that you said, you know, a great player rather than, you know, a great snare drummer, or to secure a spot in Blue Devils, because it's
right.
I think being a great musician is different than being a great snare drummer. And that's not to say that all great snare drummers aren't great musicians. They pretty much all are. But being a great musician, being a great player, is kind of a separate ballpark. So if I had to pick 5 principles to be a great player, a great musician, excuse me. The first one would be a sense of self, being able to communicate through your playing. That's what I love about like solo competitions. The whole reason I did my solo competition rather than try to march somewhere, and the whole reason why the last 3 years I've gone down to Indianapolis on the Wednesday before finals instead of actually watching finals, is to watch I&E in person, because I find that way more entertaining than watching these lines where they're all, you know, looking and sounding exactly the same. That's really cool. That's the reason why everybody's doing it. But the ability to communicate through playing, especially through percussion, which is such a barbaric sounding instrument, being able to communicate is such a valuable skill. So that's number one, a sense of self, and you're playing, being able to communicate. Number two is something I kind of touched on just now, is being able to enjoy not just playing, but also your own playing. If I take a video of my own playing, I want to be able to enjoy watching it back, even if it's not anything special. I can just play like simple 8 on a hand, take a video, watch it back, and I can enjoy the process of critiquing myself. I can enjoy the process of reflecting on how far I've come. I can enjoy the process of, you know, listening to it as if it was music. So number two is being able to enjoy your own playing. 3, a lot of people would probably put in number 1, and that's practice, consistent practice. And experimentation, I'll put in there also. Practicing not just, you know, a technique packet and watching videos and trying to look like people, but practicing to see where the music can take you, and see where you can take the music. That sounds super corny, but it's true, and that's kind of what I've spent the last couple of years doing. Not really, when you're not trying to look like someone else or sound like someone else, a really interesting thing happens in that you stop looking and sounding like everybody else. So I forget if that was 3 or 4. We'll call that 4. And then number 5 is take inspiration from other people, which is opposite number 4. So being able to watch solo players and admire what you like about them, and not being afraid to steal. There's no such thing as stealing, because music can't be copyrighted. And I will take that to the grave. I mean, you know, when it comes down to the record industry, sure, there's stealing, but
yeah,
borrowing licks and taking style choices from other players is only going to make you more versatile. And then you can tweak that. My style is just this crazy succotash of mixed flavors from all different kinds of, you know, drum corps stuff that I was watching growing up. Rhythm X had a obviously huge imprint on my playing style, and then all of my teachers, from my first private lesson teacher in high school to my 2 college professors, to, you know, the people I'm still studying with today are having a huge impact on my playing. So, being mendable, being able to have an impression made on you from other players, I think is really important. There we go. That was 4 or 5. I don't know.
That was good. I think the practice one is really good too, as far as a, you know, from my teachers and things, you know, there's practicing, but then there's purposeful practicing. Right. And practicing, you know, how I practice and how you practice is going to be a totally different mindset, because our brains think differently, we respond differently, and you know, what works for you may not work. You know, the formula may not work for someone else, and I think you got to spend time figuring out what that formula is, and be purposeful before you go in and practice. Yeah. What kind of goals you want to set, and make it realistic. You know,
a great philosophy I heard was, everybody practices differently, but if there's one thing in common, it's that everybody wants to enjoy the time they're having, no matter what you're doing. If you're practicing, or if you're standing in line at the bank, if there's an option where you're having more fun, or you're happier, you're going to take that option. So experiment with your practicing, see what you can do with yourself, not only to see what's effective, but also stuff you can do for a long amount of time because you enjoy it. I enjoy improvising over songs I could just put on a playlist and play drums to it forever and ever, because that's what I enjoy doing. Not everybody likes to do that. Some people really enjoy looking at a sheet of music and then just tackling it note by note. And if that's what you enjoy, that's what you enjoy. So yes, everybody practices differently, but there's the one aspect that everybody needs to have in common. It's that you're practicing and not hitting yourself at the same time.
Yeah. When I first started doing a four mallet technique years ago, learning the strokes and everything, on floor time. And so there's, I would spend time on the floor and work on, double verticals and then single alternating and things like that. But I got so sick of the Met that I would just like turn on Beyonce or something.
Oh yeah.
And, it's like, I can do eighth notes to a song. Like, that's way more enjoyable. And I could just sit here and listen and jam out, and I'm still working on my technique. So many ways to be creative, but that's still a Met. Find songs that are in this tempo range because they're going to be set, and you can use that as a way of practicing with the Met. You're still doing that and having fun. There's all kinds of stuff.
That's my whole thing.
Yeah.
That's literally my entire account right there, summed up.
Yep. We got any advice for writing drum music?
Yeah. And this is really vague, but it's always the first piece of advice I give out. Not every second of music has to be so interesting. Right? For example, let me give an example of where this might be wrong. So Kichi Kobayashi did this insane lick. I think it was called the Insane Lick, where it was just like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, but it was just like the hardest music for that entire chunk of time. That was sick. But I don't know if I could watch that for another minute and a half, because it's just like I can't comprehend what's going on. And at a certain point, you kind of get desensitized to exactly how ridiculous it is. So if it's short like that, yeah, try to jam as much as you can in. But as far as writing solos, doing what I do where I'm writing to like a verse of a song, if I try to make every single moment, and this is where my writing kind of fell short when I first started doing chop out. If you watch like chop outs 1 through 10, every single measure of those videos were just ridiculous. Especially number 2 is probably my least favorite. And I'm amazed that people are still like learning it and playing it, because it's so hard. I tried to play it like a year ago and I gave up. I don't know how I ever wrote that. It was just ridiculous. And personally, I look at that and I don't find that very interesting, and neither did really anybody else, except for the people that are up for the challenge. So music kind of makes more sense when it has an ebb and flow to it, when you can have these moments of interesting music happening, what did I just say? Interesting music happening, and then flowing, connecting, transitioning, going from an idea to an idea, and not just idea like a traffic jam. There has to be, time for the listener to comprehend what just happened. Yeah. So, and then another piece of advice to kind of go off of that one, just start. A lot of people complain about this like writer's block, or like, I don't know how to start this thing, or I don't know how to finish this thing, or I don't even know what I want the piece to sound like. I just know I want to write something. Well, then just write something, anything. Write 20 quarter notes over 5 measures, and then play that a bunch of times, and then listen to what it is. If it's super basic, if it's just rhythms. All my licks start out as just rhythms. A lot of times, especially if I'm playing along to like the rapping of a song, I start off with the rhythms of what the words are, play just that rhythm with whatever alternating sticking like 10, 15 times, and then listening to where the music wants to go. So write 5 measures of quarter notes, listen to which quarter note wants to change the most, and then change it. And then listen to whatever else wants to change the most, and then change that. Go on until you have, not 5 measures of quarter notes, but something that kind of makes sense. Yeah. So not being afraid to go back and change something. Because I feel like a lot of people are like, I got to write this thing, and I'm going to write it down, and here it is, and it's done. Right? It's a process. It's a long. Right. When you're writing an essay, you don't just write to the last word and then send it off. That's super dangerous. Yeah. There's going to be typos. There's going to be parts. There's going to be whole paragraphs that you're going to rip out. So not being afraid to, go back on what you already wrote.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, the more I write, the more I get comfortable with my own voice, I guess. And I think you just have to, it's just like anything else. The more time you spend with it, the better you're going to feel about it. I mean, there's still things I write that I'm just like, I don't know. But one thing for me is like, I just don't overthink it. I just don't overthink it. And Phil had a really great point last week when someone brought up about writing music for programs and was like, how difficult do you make it? How easy do you make it? And Phil just straight up said, I just write whatever the music calls for. Like there's moments in good music where it's simple, and there's moments in good music where it's complex. And good music is such a relative term, that it doesn't have to meet some sort of standard of meeting so many things. Now you can make it direct where this thing I want to focus on, flams, that can be a goal in mind as you write it. Sure. But if you're just like freestyle writing, don't overthink it and just play what the music calls for. Like you said, that's really good.
That brings me back to my favorite show, and not necessarily my favorite book from DCI, but definitely my favorite, in my opinion, the greatest show to ever be designed was Blue Coats 2015. That show is just a masterpiece, in my opinion. Yeah. And I could go on for hours about the sound design and the repertoire choice and how just like perfect it was for the theme. But the book itself, I think, is the perfect example of super minimal and not very hard. I could play that whole book, when it was the summer, like before finals. I learned the whole book from transcriptions I found, and I was 17 years old. Yeah. And that's because it's not a hard book. The hardest thing in it is probably like Swiss drags. Yeah. Right? And that's nothing. Because the phrases made sense. A lot of the playing is transition stuff, which is just these eighth notes. Where in the lot, that probably didn't sound that cool. Even though I think it's like one of the most viewed lot videos of all time. Is the 2015 Flam Jam thing. Yeah. In the lot, the music probably wasn't that interesting because it was a lot of just eighth notes and dynamic swelling. But the musicality of the music was so great, and the way it blended with the ensemble, that percussion section got like a crazy score at finals, and they were playing really easy music. So I always pull that up as an example of not everything has to be super interesting in order for it to be successful and adored, and especially to score high because we have to do everything creditably for some reason.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be crazy busy. Just be musical.
Right. Exactly.
You can make eighth notes as interesting or as boring as you want. So cool. Are there any more questions? These are really good. It's a good conversation.
Give me a hard one. Come on, someone stump me.
Need a hard question.
I've been stumped in Instagram Live before. It's not fun. It's always people that are like, play Chop Out 5. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even remember making that.
Oh man, what was the stumped question? Was that what it was?
Yeah. It's people that are like, play this grid, and I'm like, all right, I'll try it, and then I just completely eat it. Because I don't play grids that much. I have a tough relationship with grids.
I do too, actually. I don't really spend a whole lot of time on. I mean, I probably should a whole lot more. I get them, I understand them, but at the same time, I really only try to practice grids unless it relates to context of things that I'm actually going to be playing. Right. If it's going to help me with whatever this thing I'm learning, it's like, I needed to play this one lick. I was like, God, I hadn't played book reports in a long time because that's just it's kind of a silly rudiment. But the piece had a lot of book report stuff in it, so I made myself my own exercise and grid, and then it worked. But as far as just like sitting down and chopping grids, I don't really do it, but you know.
Exactly.
This says one person's heading out. Thanks for the great advice. You're welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Reese gets good.
Yeah.
I always find it really funny to read people's usernames to people. I watched some video that was like, screen names are so interesting because a lot of people haven't had their username read to them much.
Yeah.
But it's what you go by, and it's what people know you by, especially on Instagram.
Yep.
So when people call me Chop Out, like all my friends sometimes call me Chop Out as a joke, it feels really uncomfortable because that's not something that you usually hear out loud.
Yeah.
So I always do that in my live streams.
It's always funny. Yeah, I watched that TV show Dave. It's about Little Dicky.
Oh yeah.
And then his whole thing throughout that whole thing was people be like, "Hey, Little Dicky," and he's like, "It's Dave. My name's Dave. It's fine. You can call me Dave." You know, it's just like really funny. It's kind of a similar thing. Well, cool. Well, if there's not any more questions, well, we can wrap it up soon. If no one has any stumped questions, you mentioned 2015 Bluecoats was your favorite show as far as one aspect. What about what would be your favorite music book?
For drums.
Yeah.
Geez, that's a toughie. I think Blue Devils 2014, Fellini-esque.
Yep.
That book was, again, kind of along the same lines, exactly what that show needed. And it was really cool. It's stinking hard. It was before Blue Devils switched to System Blue, and once they got those drums, they just made everything super hard.
Yeah.
And that's why they're kind of my favorite drumline now, is because Scott Johnson just hates those guys, and he just gives them the stupidest, like, nonsensical beats on earth, and you can't even tell what's going on. So it's fun to watch and try to figure out what they're doing with their hands. But 2014 was the peak of their musicality. That rings a bell, and then like Vanguard 20 something, I don't know. Paul Rennick has never written a bad book, and I'll take that to the grave.
Yeah, I believe that too. We got this will be our last question because we're going to run out of time, and we'll do it in less than 2 minutes. Toughest or more challenging exercise you played or written?
That's a good one. There's just a lot of weird flam exercises. Exercises that take the accent and then just hold it over the flam for a little bit and then just throw it, and you gotta go find it somewhere else in the phrase. That's always the most challenging for me because it just stops the fluidity of the playing. So as far as hard exercises, anything that's purposely unnatural will always be the hardest. So, for example, there's one called "How About to Chuts?" Wait, no. Yeah, "How About to Chuts" is pretty hard once you get to the back half of it. That's I think Josh Bricky or Tim Jackson, someone at Rhythm X wrote it. Easy enough on bass 5, pretty hard on snare.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. And thank you, man, so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a good chat.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again sometime. We'll keep it updated. I'll have this posted on YouTube within the next couple of days as well. So people who missed it, they can watch it. And if you guys ever have any other questions, feel free to DM us or anything like that, and we'll make sure we'll get to you. So this was great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good job.
I'll see you until next time.